In preparation for our Whitfield Championship telecast on Prime, we had the pleasant fortune of talking football with maybe the best high school coach in Western Pennsylvania history. The argument can be made his teams did not lose a single game at Braddock High from 1954 through 1959, as they were champions a record 6 straight times. Now, their 46-game win streak during that time, by far the longest in Whitfield history, and at the time, in 1959, it was the longest in the country. The only blemish on a 53-0-1 record in that time was a championship game tie with Midland in 1954. After that, he went on to coach at 6 different colleges and 1 final high school, but never to retire. We think that you'll enjoy our conversation with the coach.
Well, why didn't you ever play football before? Because he could throw pretty good. And he said, well, I had mono as a sophomore in high school, and then he had I think a liver disease similar to mono, his junior year, and then his high school coach wouldn't let him play his senior year because he was a star basketball player. And boy, about the 3rd game, I put him in, and he was so raw, he went up behind the right guard to get the ball. The second play, I had sent in the play what to call, and my line goes offside, and I come out and I call a timeout, and I go out in the field and I ask the kids, what's wrong? Why are you making mistakes? He says, Coach, you better you're telling this donkey what play to call. He doesn't know enough to give us a starting count, So I started to send in the starting count. I'd say, 222 on 2 or something like that, or 223 on 1. And so in the last quarter of the game, he threw a touchdown pass, pretty nice. And the last game of the season, we played Shadyside, and he completed 19 out of 19 passes. And I took the tape, and I sent it to friend Gary Stevens, he's now the offensive coordinator of the Dolphins, but he was the coach at Miami at the time, or their quarterback coach. And he says, Chuck, where have you been hiding this boy? He said, he has talent. Why? He said, I have already promised quarterbacks their scholarships. He says, I'll get the coach at SMU to look at him. Forrest Gregg was the coach at SMU, and Forrest called and offered him a scholarship right away. And he went there, and he broke all of Meredith's records. He holds all the passing records at SMU. Got drafted by the Eagles. His name's Freiberger. He went to the Eagles and had the Eagles team made until the Eagles got Bubby Brister. Huh. And, they went for a more experienced backup quarterback than Freiberger. And know what Freiberger's doing now? He's doing the color for SMU.
Oh, that's classic.
Yeah.
Is that, I don't know, is that the... most amazing development?
The most amazing, I think, of somebody that never played before. You never hear of this happening. In fact, this story was on the Sports Reporters on Sunday morning. They had a story about Danny Freiberger right before he went to college.
Obviously, coaching for over 6 different decades. Is that the most gratifying, single coaching experience?
No, there have been so many.
Sean, yeah, I guess. Tell us a couple other ones, if you could.
Without a doubt, my experiences at Braddock, had to be the most satisfying. And, Braddock, their teams had not been very good for about 10 years prior to that, and I came in as coach, and you couldn't believe we had no locker room. We had 1 shower. The equipment that had been used on the last game of the season, a year, almost 9, 10 months before, it was a muddy game, and it was still laying in dirt, which had dried up anyway. So I come in, I look at, there was 29 pieces of equipment, and I go to the school director that hired me, and I said, your son's coming out for football. Do you want him to wear that equipment? And he said, no way. He said, let's get a wheelbarrow, and we burned all the equipment. And then I was fortunate, I was lucky. I knew some friends who I got to coach with me, and we had a good staff, and we just completely turned the program around. And at that time, Sean, there wasn't as many black youngsters playing football as there are today, especially in a community like Braddock. My first year there, we had 3 blacks on the team, and 8 whites were regular starters. And my last year there, we were the complete opposite. We had 8 blacks and 3 whites. But the community was really proud of their team. And I point, we had a great principal and a great superintendent who were good disciplinarians, and we had a great school where things have changed so much. The Braddock community used to be, I think, the 3rd largest shopping district in Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County. Pittsburgh was 1, East Liberty was 2, and Braddock was 3. There's no shopping district there now. It's completely changed. But the first year it was hard, and we graduated every player but 1.
The first year?
After the first year. Oh. So you sort of said to yourself, boy, we're going to go downhill. But the 1 player was a great player, and I guess maybe our opponents were not quite as strong the second year. And he led the WPL in scoring. He had 20 touchdowns, which, we didn't score as much then as we do now. And he and it was a family of Reeves brothers, and there was he went to Cincinnati to university. His second brother went to Arizona State and was an All-American at Arizona State, and his youngest brother Kenny went to Norfolk State, a black school, first-round draft choice of the Atlanta Falcons, played in 10 Pro Bowls. Yeah. And there was a success of a gifted talent. I mean, you could almost tell he was going to do it.
Absolutely.
Right from the beginning.
You talked about, I mean, those are 2 amazing, pretty good success stories, people developing. You had, of course, that 56-game streak. Well, it was 54 while you were there, with only 1 tie. But if you look at how those games went, I mean, you averaged 26 points a game over that streak, and I think you gave up less than a touchdown. But it wasn't all running, it wasn't all passing.
No, we were. A lot of people probably didn't care because I was so conservative. We had averaged passing 6 passes a game. We would complete 5, and at least 1 was a touchdown. So statistically, our average was fantastically good, and we would always have 3 running backs. It isn't like today where they have the eye tailback and he carries the ball 30, 40 times a game. Each of my backs would carry 15 times a game, but all would gain over 100 yards a game. So we spread it out, and we had great teamwork because they would want to block for their other backfield mate, because when they carried the ball, they were depending on them to block. I remember one game, it jumps out at me. We were playing Midland, who was a par, and we were in the middle division. It was Class A. And there was a double A, which was like a quad A today, and then there was a single A. No, then there was a Class B, which was a class over us, and there was even a Class C. at that time. And we're playing Midland, and it's a tough game, and we get the ball with about 6 minutes to go, and we're 3-4 points behind and 80 yards away, and we started a drive. And I ran my best back. And he went 8 yards off right tackle and 10 yards off of left tackle. And we just marched down the field, and we get the ball first and goal on the 1. And he goes off right tackle for about 12 inches, goes off left tackle for about 6 inches, goes over right tackle for 6 inches, and I call a timeout, and we weren't allowed out on the field, but our quarterback could come over, and I told the quarterback, I'm going to call that same play that we went up and down the field with. Don't tell anybody. You fake the ball, and you just keep it. And he faked to this back that had taken us all the way down the field, and he ran around in. There wasn't anybody near him. But the funny thing to us, the kid that did all this running, he takes his helmet off and he throws it down on the field. He wouldn't forgive me for the longest time. He still thought he was going to get it in, but he was proven that he wasn't going to get it in. But another big difference is, it was hard to get into the playoffs then. You had to be undefeated. And there were times when there would be 3 and 4 teams undefeated. And I think I'm right that there were more teams playing football then than are playing now, because where there's jointures today,
there's fewer schools.
We had individual teams like Woodland Hills. There might have been 8 high school football teams that are going to Woodland Hills now. So we all had teams. So 5 out of the 6 years we played in the playoff. My second year, we were the only undefeated team, so we were the champions without a playoff.
But they didn't have a championship game?
They wouldn't have a championship game if you were the only undefeated team.
That's neat.
Now, the other thing, though, that was sad, if there were 3 or 4 undefeated teams, which there were at times, there would be a good football team who didn't have the Gardner points, who would not get into the playoffs. So that was, in fact, one year, I think my 5th year, we came pretty close to not getting in the playoffs. We were the 3rd ranked team. Crafton High School was the 1 ranked team, and Waynesburg was 1-2. And at the last minute, I think Scott Township or Carnegie found an ineligible player on the Crafton team. So if Carnegie would beat Scott Township, they would get into the playoffs. Well, Scott Township beat Carnegie, and we slipped in backwards and then beat Waynesburg, for the championship. So
was that the last one?
No, that was the 5th.
That was the 5th.
And then the 6th game we played, we were the number 1 ranked team, and we played Waynesburg the 2nd time. But, you look at the playoffs today, if it was the same rules, Penn Hills would be the Quad A champion. There would not be a championship game. I look at Double A, there's maybe 3 or 4 undefeated teams. Well, there'll be 1 or 2 of them won't even get into the playoffs. I think in one of the divisions, maybe the Triple A, there are no undefeated teams. And if there's an undefeated but tied, they would be determined the champion. So it is different, but I like this today because it doesn't punish that undefeated team that's in 3rd or 4th place in the Gardner point system. They still get a chance, to go for the championship.
the first championship that you got your team to was Midland. That was a tie. Was that your fault? How did it end up in a tie?
I remember the game really well.
I'll bet.
Midland was a very good team. In fact, their quarterback, Ivan Tonsick, became a regular quarterback at Pitt. Their running back, Jack Flera, was a regular halfback at Pitt. And they had a big tackle, Henry Suffaletta, that played regular at Pitt. There's three from one high school, were regular players at Pitt. And we actually had the better of them the whole game, almost. I even had some friends that came down too early and wanted to congratulate me, and I wouldn't have any part of it. But 2 minutes to play, they threw a pass, and I honestly didn't think the boy caught the pass. It almost bounced off of his chest, and Flera picked up, he was a very fast back, he picked up this fumble that's rolling around, and he runs about 70 yards for the touchdown, and Suffaletta kicks the extra point to tie us 7-7. But they were a good team, and I think it's a great accomplishment to tie for a WPIL championship.
To tie for one, let alone to tie for one and then win 5 the next 5 years.
Yeah.
You obviously left after beating Waynesburg for that 6th. And you got the job at Rutgers. I mean, what was the decision-making process for that?
Well, I had turned down a couple of college jobs, assistant jobs. The only way to ever be a head coach in college at that time, you had to serve your apprenticeship and be an assistant coach. And the job at Rutgers, I knew the head coach, John Bateman. I liked him. And I had 5 children, and I used to hear that the only way you could ever make sure your kids got a college education was to either have enough money or maybe live in the college town or have if you worked on the faculty, they gave you a waiver of tuition, and this is what Rutgers was doing. So I wanted to, to protect my family that way, and I guess I wanted to try college coaching. And the funny thing, I tried it for a year, and I hated it.
Really?
I wanted to come back to high school coaching so bad in Western Pennsylvania. In fact, I didn't have the contract in my hand, but I had an offer to coach at one of the largest high schools in Western Pennsylvania that following year. And I was back in Pittsburgh at a coaches convention when the Army job opened up. And the Army coach I'd met before, and I met him at the William Penn Hotel, and we talked about it. And about a month later, I got the job at Army, and I passed up this job at a big high school. And the Army thing was attractive because at that time, Army was the best stepping stone to a major college coaching job. Everybody that coached at Army got a head coaching job. And so that was attractive to me. Plus, we got the biggest home we ever lived in. It was the same home that a colonel would live in the Army, and I have this good-sized family at that time of 5 children. But an example, one of my best examples of why college job is important. There was a young high school coach at Elwood City High School at this time, and I went to recruit in Elwood City out of Army, and his name was Chuck Knox. And Chuck says to me, I understand the convention is out in Cincinnati this year. Are you going? I said, well, I'm going next week. I'm going to recruit around here a couple more days, and I'm driving out to Cincinnati. And Knox said, gee, I hear that's where you can get a college job. Would you take me with you, So I picked him up at his home in Elwood City and we're driving out to Cincinnati, and he said, Chuck, he said, tell me how to get a college job, And I said, well, you got to be prepared for an interview, and you got to have what this man wants. And if the man wants a line coach, you got to be a specialist in line play. If he wants a backfield coach, you got to be a specialist in backfield play. And you can't be a general practitioner like most high school coaches are. And we talked, and he said, what kind of questions would you get asked? And I said, well, can you teach the shoulder block? How would you teach the shoulder block? And we went through that in drills. And we got out to Cincinnati, and I said, Chuck, there's an assistant leaving Army by the name of Paul Amon going to Wake Forest. And I said, I'll get you an interview. He got an interview, and he comes back to me an hour later. He says, I got offered the job. I'm going to Wake Forest. So I think this is interesting. He goes from Wake Forest to Kentucky. He meets a guy at Kentucky who had pro connections. He was at Kentucky 2 or 3 years, and he gets an assistant's job at what is now called the New York Jets. They were called the Titans at the time. And he went around the NFL as an assistant. He was an assistant at Detroit Lions. And I got to go back to the story about him going with me to Cincinnati. He had no money. And he ate with me, and I picked up the tab for breakfast and lunch and so forth. And we took the mattress off my bed and threw it on the floor, and he slept on the floor. I slept on the box springs, At least he had a mattress. So when he got interviewed for the Los Angeles Rams job by Carol Rosenblum, and he's telling Carol Rosenblum asked him, how did you get into coaching? And he told this story, that he wanted to get in coaching so bad that he used to sleep on the floor, of a hotel. And here's Rosenblum, a multi-millionaire, and he says, anybody that will make those sacrifices to be a coach. And that was written up in Sports Illustrated, how he got the Los Angeles Rams job. So.
Your team the old Braddock team was written up in Sports Illustrated too. What was that like? I guess that must have been something in those days for the community.
Sean, there's a story behind that teaches all a lesson. You got to have nerve. I had a friend, and this guy had more nerve than any guy I've ever been around. At that time, Sports Illustrated was just getting started. It was a new kid on the block. And the big picture magazines was Look and Life. And Ernie Vida, when we had this streak going of about 40-some wins in a row, he did some research, and he saw that Massillon had the longest streak in the country, 45 games in a row. Paul Brown was their coach when they had the streak. So he calls Sports Illustrated up, gets somebody on the phone, and he goes, I'm the public relations man from Braddock High School. Our team is going to break the national record this week if we win on Friday night, and we're going to win. And Look and Life have been fighting with me, to come out and have the exclusive. But you're a sports magazine. I'd like to give it to you rather than Look or Life. So if you'll come out, he said, I'll make all the arrangements, and you'll have, and I will not permit the story to go to Look and Life. So what Sports Illustrated would do at that time, they would get a young writer, or not a young writer, Eddie Beecher was the top writer for the Pittsburgh Press at the time, and he came and did the story, but he had two cameramen with him, and they had to take 2,000 pictures. They followed you around for 2 days before the game, the day of the game, after the game, and so forth, and we had 4 pages, which is something in Sports Illustrated, and they had one big page. I had a great running back, boy by the name of Curtis Vick. If you ever on Route 30 and you go across the Westinghouse Bridge, if you're coming from Pittsburgh going east, there's a hill there. It's called Crestus Terrace. And Curtis lived up on Crestus Terrace, and I picked him up and drove him to school. And they have a picture of him running up to my car, and you can see a beautiful picture of the Edgar Thompson steel mills in the background, you know. And but they had pictures of the kids at a high school dance and the pep rallies and all kind of things like that. But it was the nerve of Ernie Vida, this friend, who made the thing possible, you know.
Yeah. Well, that one of the other pictures too, pretty famous, was the old Notre Dame hat. And the pretty good story with that.
Well, that one was, you know, every community has a Notre Dame fan, and this man comes back from Notre Dame. It was a guy. I think his first name was Vinny Valiceni. And Vinny had a Notre Dame hat, you know, and he gave it to me, and I started to wear it because I was the kind of guy, you know, on a sunny day, I would squint like anything, and the kids saw me with this ND on the hat, you know, and one kid says, "What school's that, Coach?" Or "What pro team's that?" You know, and one of the other kids said, "Oh, you have to be dumb. You know that means no defeat." You know, and that was our intent, never to have a defeat.
Back in those days, too, it was not uncommon for you to get 9,000-10,000 people at games. That's pretty uncommon these days.
Sean, I have it on my desk, and I should have asked my wife, and she'll pick me up, or we'll ride out that way. I'll give you even a shorter way home, maybe. But I have a tape of all of the, really almost all the touchdown runs. You know, there's 100 of them or so. But on the first part of this tape, there's some human interest. I think it's human interest. They have me picking me up and carrying me off the field after a championship game. Not that that's anything great. But one of our games with North Braddock, and, you know, we were only divided by a railroad tracks. Anyone south of the tracks was Braddock, and anyone north of the tracks was North Braddock. And we never played a home game. That might be the most amazing thing about the streak. Although, yes, we did play a home game, but we played them on North Braddock's field. And they had the field with the first night football game in America. Is at North Braddock's stadium at that time. And there's a picture, and their stadium was 15, 20 rows of bleachers, complete horseshoe. And then they have a fence around, so this cameraman panned that field. You can see the crowd, you know, and you know it's a big crowd. Well, they even made the crowd bigger. There'd be so many people come in that they would stand behind this fence that was maybe 4 or 5 feet high, and there's still no room. So they would come out on the field, and they would stand on the field, and the school districts were in good with the Allegheny County Police, and at that time they had horse police in Allegheny County, and the horses would patrol the sideline, and these policemen really knew how to control a crowd. That horse would come and it would turn its butt in towards you, and boy, the crowd would get back, and every once in a while he would gallop the horse, and boy, you could see the fans jumping out. And we had 2 games with North Braddock that they're undefeated and we're undefeated, and we kick a field goal on one game on the last play of the game, and the ball actually hit the upright and sort of fluttered, and then went the right way over, you know, for us to win the one game. And the next year, we're undefeated. They started really had the better of us, and they're driving for a touchdown that would have put them ahead, 10 points and put the game out of reach. And we go into a 11-man line, the only way we're going to stop them, and they throw a pass, and our kids were playing man for man, and they ran back with the receiver and intercepted the ball, but we're still 90 yards away with a minute and a half to go, and our quarterback takes us down the field, and last play of the game, and you talk about pandemonium breaking loose. We see that Northwestern game the other day where everybody, that's the way it was,
Was it like that just for that game, or?
Well, especially for that game. When you have two rivals, and see, everybody that lived in Braddock and everybody that lived in North Braddock worked in the Edgar Thompson steel mill. Those people would work right next to each other, and you heard all kind of fantastic stories about money bet on the game. You hear the story of of the great player Franny Rogel. His name is actually Rogel, but everyone pronounces it Rogel. High diddle diddle. Rogel goes up the middle for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right. Well, Franny played at North Braddock. Oh, I didn't. And they had a great game, North Braddock versus Turtle Creek Union, and the star player for Turtle Creek Union was Leon Hart. And Franny beats Turtle Creek. And they say Franny walked off the field with his helmet like this in his hand, and the grateful fans from North Braddock were dropping dollar bills in his hat. And I'm a decent friend of Franny, and one of his closest friends told me that in that hat was over $250. But that's what high school football in that era, when that's like maybe $2,500 today. I'm going to guess. But the WPIAL, historically, is the greatest high school football conference in the country. At one time, Alabama, Tennessee would come to Western Pennsylvania for 2-3 football players every year, because high school football in the South was not good. But now it has gotten good. There's good high school football everywhere. But at one time, the WPIAL was the best in the nation.
I know you stay pretty close touch with hockey. You were just telling us about who was in first place and all this. So do you get the games, or do you just read about them mostly? What do you think about the high school football that's being played today?
I think it's great. I have watched films, of tapes of games, and I told you I have 10 camps in the summer where high school football teams come to my camps, and so I see a lot of those teams, and I think the coaching is great today. When I was a young player in high school, we had one coach, and he might have had an assistant. Then when I was coaching at Pitcairn, I had 21 players on my team, and I was the backfield. I was the line coach, and Pete Anmarino, the veteran coach at Monroeville Gateway, was my assistant when I started out at Pitcairn. So then when I went to Braddock, I had maybe 2 assistants, and George Hayes, an ex-Steeler, was one of my assistants, and Bobby Teat was another, and we had several as they changed around. But the coaching staffs are so much larger, and they work at it more than they did, at that time.
About how many kids did you have in your team at Braddock?
First year, 29. But my last couple years, there would be 65, 70 on the varsity, and there was a junior high team of 30 So we had a lot of youngsters participating.
I guess obviously the winning is going to help with that, but anything else consciously you did to get more kids involved?
I think, I've been an idea man, I think, all of my life. We did things at Braddock in that era that no other high school was doing. For example, we had the best equipment because we burned it all. We got all brand new equipment, so that's one. We had a coal pile to practice on. Our practice field was terrible. So we would go over to Frick Park that had one of the nicest fields in the area, and we'd bus over there for practice. And we would, during preseason camp, we would eat training meals in restaurants in Braddock. And then when the season got started, the day of a game, we would have a nice pep rally every game, and then we would go down to the Elks Lodge and have a pregame meal. We would go to a movie theater in town. We would watch On the Waterfront or some real gung-ho Guadalcanal Diary or something, and watch a movie. And I and the trainer would tape the youngsters out in the lobby of the theater, and we would leave at the last minute to go to the field. And after the game, we had a spread of food and Coca-Colas and stuff like that. We were maybe the first high school that took movies of every game. We took movies of our preseason practices, and we were always one step ahead, where everybody eventually started to copy some of these things.
Obviously, to be able to do that, you had to have pretty much the whole community involved. I mean, you're getting meals in restaurants and movies and the whole thing. It must have been bigger than just football games to the community.
Great community pride. The Chamber of Commerce was behind the team. You went, let's say you'd hear of a father losing a job, and he was thinking about moving where he could get another job. Somehow that father got a job in the community.
I guess that might be frowned upon today.
Well, the part about helping a parent get a job, I don't think that there would be anything wrong. It would be wrong if we went out to another community and pulled a youngster in. I'd be the first. That is something we never did. But there was youngsters that wanted to come to our community, to play, because they hear the program is good.
How about getting back to, you're talking about the movies, the gung-ho movies. You like the military influence. I guess the old story about the letters of Marshal Rommel.
Okay.
You actually had players read them?
Yes, that was a history lesson for them. I guess, I teach a course, I think I told you, on people skills in coaching. And I learned a lot of football playing at college and at Penn State and at Slippery Rock, and I learned a lot of teaching techniques in my classrooms and things of that type. But the greatest developer to help me to be a teacher and to be a coach is the Marine Corps training that I received. I went to boot camp in the Marine Corps, and then I went to OCS in the Marine Corps, and I trained a platoon and took them to the South Pacific, and fortunately, while we were on our boat going over, the war is over. But the training that I learned as a young Marine has helped me be a teacher, today, and it was the greatest thing that I ever did. So the military has been a big influence, and then spending 3.5 years at West Point. And incidentally, there was some happy times and some sad times there. The happy times was that we beat Penn State 3 years in a row when I was at West Point. The sad times was that we had to play against Staubach, and we lost 3 tough games against the Navy. But then really the saddest was that 10 of the kids that I coached got killed in Vietnam. But the military has been a big influence in my life.
You were talking about telling Coach Knox how to get into college coaching, and he talked about how he wanted it so badly. He said, how did you ever get involved in, when you started at Pitcairn? How did that come about? Would you always want to be a coach growing up?
I tell you, in fact, I still have it. I had a civics teacher in 7th grade that made us write on careers. We had to write a paper, and it's maybe 20 pages long, and it's almost fallen apart, but I have it in a file. Every once in a while I look at it, my career to be a football coach. So that was 7th grade. I was thinking about that.
And you're still coaching after 6 decades, but 70 years old now.
I'm over 70.
Over 70. Anyway, you talk about these clinics and also the coaching things. What do you think about the way the styles, I guess, of football that are being played, and is it different in high school than when you were?
I think we're influenced so much by the pro game, which I think is not a good influence today, because everything is after the dollar. And my pet peeve and concern is the violence that there is in football. Even little kids on the sandlots are copying, what the pros do. One of my pet peeves is also the TV shots of the players spearing, hitting with the head, which is a foul and against the spirit of the rules of the game. And kids are seeing this, and they think it's the right thing to do, and it's the wrong thing to do. I've won a lot of football games. But the thing I'm proudest of more than anything else is I've never had a youngster seriously hurt playing football. And gee, when you coach it for 48 years, there must be something that I'm doing. And everything that I'm doing, I'm trying to prevent injuries, because I feel if I teach good techniques and good fundamentals, we're eventually going to win games. With good fundamentals, and we don't have to do anything that is against the spirit and the rules of the game.
You started at Pitcairn and went to Braddock, and then 6 different colleges. Moved up. You mentioned that you went to Rutgers, basically with the intent of moving up and going to Army, moving up to a big-time program, a big-time school. You basically rebuilt the program at CMU, or built the program at CMU, and it's still a real strong program. One of your former players coaching there, Rich Lackner. But then you retired, or semi-retired, because you're still not retired in my mind, but from Kiski Prep, which is back to high school. Is there reasoning for that, getting back to high school last?
Well, football has given me a great life, a great living. I have a great family. It's because of football that they're all educated and I think doing well. So I want to repay to football. And I would, health being, and my health is really good. There's not many guys. I just came from swimming 1,000 meters, and I'm doing that because my knees are worn out. But I'm in excellent health, and I really have enjoyed going to Europe to coach. I've had 3 trips to Europe in the last year, and I have given clinics all over Europe. I have been an advisory coach for the Swiss national team and the national team in Austria, and I just have a letter out in my file. I'm writing to a friend in Spain. I think I might be going to Spain next year, and kids will. I'll walk around I'll come onto a practice field in Europe, and I'm dragging a bag of footballs, and kids will come running. They know me, and I'll be at a practice, and I'll see. I'm not even coaching. There's practice, and I look at the quarterback, and the quarterback will look at me, and the kids in Europe, they want to throw the ball funny. They try to spin the ball off of their hands, and the quick way to throw is to turn the thumb down, and the quarterback will see me, and I'm looking at him. He goes, he's doing that, yeah, and then there'll be a lineman, blocking, and he's taking pee-pee steps, and his feet are real narrow, and he'll see me, and he'll start widening his feet and getting his knees in, because that's the way I teach, their legs, and their shoulders on the wrong side. I teach real hard. Keep your shoulder and your head between the man you're blocking and where the ball carrier is going, and they'll see me, and they're going like that. So so I really feel I'm helping them, and I don't like to go over there for too long periods of time, but I like to go over often.
I can see, there's a gleam just talking about that just comes to your eyes, and you really like teaching this game to people who don't know it.
Oh, yeah, and maybe, Sean, that's why I've preferred the high school age. I've had coaches tell me, they want me to coach a junior high team. That's the greatest thing that you can have happen to you, because those kids want to learn so much, and I welcome the opportunity to teach people that want to learn.
About in order to coach this long, you either have to have found a sainted wife, your wife Joanne, or probably no doubt sainted as well, but obviously somebody who loved football too.
Well, my wife has been a very understanding wife and mother. There were times when one of our son had a serious sickness right in the middle of football season, and thank goodness she was able to recognize it and took our son to the doctor, or we wouldn't have been able to have him with us. And but she's been a good mother, but good wife, and maybe the best cheerleader that anyone could have. She has seen more football games than 99% of men. For example, for 48 years, she's averaged at least 10 games, and then when I would scout on, an off night, she would go scouting. It was her night out. We might go and get a hot dog after the game or something, but she's seen a lot of football, and she knows football. She laughs. She likes to go to a game and hear fans talking. And she said, these people, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't really know the rules. She'll ask me all the time on rules. So what about this one? What about that one? So she's very understanding, and Sean, she'd make the greatest PR person for a athletic department there is, because she come in here today with some donuts. I didn't ask her to do that. That's her PR idea.
I was going to say she could probably coach against you.
I'd hate to coach against her.
Be quite a match. You're sitting here listening. It almost seems like going back to that comment about the paper you wrote in 7th grade, almost like you were born to coach. But who were your influences? Where did it come from?
Oh, my dad had to be a big influence. He was a sport fan. He was actually the mayor of my little hometown of Wilmerding for 24 years. And he tells a great football story. His best friend was a guy by the name of Bob Shiring, who played for the Canton Bulldogs from about 1914 to 1920, one of the original NFL teams. And my dad would get on a train in Pittsburgh with Bob, and they'd go out to Canton. And before the game, he said at that time they introduced the pro team, and they used to say what college they were from. And on the Canton Bulldogs was, at left end, was Newt Rockne of Notre Dame. And at quarterback is Gus Doré from Notre Dame. At halfback is Jim Thorpe from the Carlisle Indian School. And they had introduced Bob Shiring, the center from Marquette. And my dad's riding back in the train with Bob Shiring and said, "Bob, you never went to college. Why are you saying that you went to Marquette?" He said, "Chuck, what's the name of the bar that we go to have a beer at night?" And my dad said, "The Marquette Cup." He said, "Well, I spend a lot of time at the Marquette, and I thought that would be interesting to a real ancient football fan."
Oh, that's a great story. But basically, it was just your love of playing the game that made you think you wanted to coach it someday? But who coached you?
Oh, I had some very good coaches. My high school coaches were excellent coaches. A guy by the name of Art Weigel, and he was a great disciplinarian. I classify, there's 4 types of coaches. There's I don't know whether I can think of them all. One is I call him the dominant coach. My high school coach was a dominant coach. And he learned off a guy like Jock Sutherland, who anyone that knew Pitt in that era was a dominant type coach. Then there were the cheerleader type coach, which I think is good too. That you influence. Oh, that's the way to go. Good block. Good tackle. My idea of a cheerleading type coach is John Madden, the former Oakland Raider coach. Tommy LaRosa, is that correct? The Dodger coach.
Sort of. Yeah.
Sort of. He's a cheerleader type coach. Then there's the steady Sam type coach. Never gets excited. Straight. We'll balk the same way we did last year. That's Tom Osborne. The Nebraska coaches. That's steady Sam. Then my 4th type of coach is competent Carl. Bill Walsh is a competent Carl. Chuck Noll is sort of a competent, Carl type coach. So I've studied coaches, but I had, great coaches at Penn State and good coach at Slippery Rock, and it was interesting to me. Last week I was honored and inducted in the Pennsylvania Hall of Fame, and I was looking over the roster of people. And my coach at Penn State, Bob Higgins, my assistant coach at Penn State, Earl Edwards, who went on to North Carolina State, is a great coach. They're in the Hall of Fame. My coach from Slippery Rock, Kerr Thompson, is in the Hall of Fame. My boxing coach at Penn State, Leo Hauk, was in the Hall of Fame. So I had great teaching.
If you were asked today, I noticed you coached your grandson. I know that must have been quite an experience in your last years at Kiski Prep. And I don't know, if you're meeting an 8th grader or 7th or 6th grader, somebody who hasn't decided whether or not they want to play high school football, what would you tell them to help them decide?
Well, I don't believe in starting to play football too early. I wished I could keep people until they're about 9th grade before they start playing football, because I don't think they're their joints are developed quite well enough. I really have done a great job on this because I have grandchildren now that are wanting to play football, and they're all starting too early. But I advise, I like to see youngsters playing soccer in grade school and all other sports. I believe in the all-around athlete, not the guy that, worst thing in the world is just concentrate on football, football, football. I love to play basketball. The worst thing in the world would have been concentrate basketball, basketball. Play both. Play another sport. And I always was doing something the whole year round. But I laugh. I'm a great influence. I have a grandson down in Morgantown, and their neighbor is Jeff Hostetler, the quarterback for the Raiders, you know, and I thought I was going to do a really great job with Scotty. He was about 5th grade, and he wanted to play midget football, and I said, talk to Jeff, he'll tell you. And Jeff says, well, you ought to wait till your 9th grade, Scotty. Well, when Scotty was in 5th grade, he was playing midget football. But so you can't influence. You can only do so much. A kid is still going to do what his peers are doing, and that's the greatest influence.
What, all these years of coaching, is there any one thing that has been the best part of it? What's been the best part of it for you?
I think, without a doubt, the best part is seeing the success of people that you have coached and seeing how they're doing in life. You know, without a doubt, I've coached more African Methodist preachers than anyone. I have at least 3 boys that played for me at Braddock are African Methodist preachers today. Another profession that I have a great number is I have to have a half a dozen orthopedic surgeons. One of my ex-players, Jimmy D'Antonio, is a surgeon who has invented the parts for hip and knee replacements. Another, Tony DeGioia, who's a Carnegie Mellon graduate, is an orthopedic surgeon, and he's developed a robot that goes into our hip. And, you know, the doctors, when they would make a hip replacement, they used to take a chisel and chisel the bad part of our hip out. Well, Tony has a milling machine that mills a perfect socket for our hip, but he has a robot running that milling machine, and then he has the robot turning the camera so he can do it. So, you know, to see kids do things like this is a thing I think is the greatest that has happened to me.
Thanks. That's great. Thanks very much.
I didn't even know we were started.
What did that take? Oh, no, that was...
The man even coached his grandson 4 years at Kiski Prep. Jeffrey Simmons wrote a paper his senior year at Kiski about how proud he is to call his grandfather coach. What else could you call him? I looked it up. Next to the word coach in the dictionary is Chuck Klausing's picture.